a lot of times we don't want to be honest with ourselves. We will lie to ourselves. And so my metaphor in all of this is truth is a bit like whiskey or red wine or cigars. It's an acquired taste. If you're new to it and you try to consume it in volume, you're not going to like it at all. So you have to incrementally, and I will tell you, if there's shame or guilt or condemnation or ego or pride associated, that's going to mess it all up. You have to be able to cut yourself some slack, give yourself some grace, and to not let somebody else push their guilt or shame on you, so that when you tell yourself that truth that is ugly and is unpalatable and really doesn't align with this image that you want to create for yourself, sweeping it under the rug doesn't make it not real. It's still there.
All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Hart Hustle Podcast. Now, I'm incredibly excited to share another amazing story of this leader who sits across this digital table with me. Today, I've got Jay Lucas, the president of Reputable Recruiting, here on the show. Jay, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
It is a mouthful for somebody who's
you
not hitting yet.
I know. It's the one thing about the name I can't stand is what a mouthful it is.
Reputable Recruiting. That's what we're talking about here today, man. Well, Jay, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, man. I'm really excited to be able to highlight your heart and hustle. One of the things that you said to me in our previous conversation was, often people don't go to school for executive recruiting. We all find ourselves in different paths that lead us kind of to this opportunity. So before we kind of dive into that, how's your heart feeling today, Jay?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, feeling good. Physically and metaphorically good.
I love it, man. Well, how about what's the highlight of your 2024? As the time we record this, it's December 5th? December 5th today. So what's been your 2024 highlight?
Man. Well, it's funny because I can separate life into buckets. There's my spiritual bucket, there's my professional bucket, there's my family bucket. And, to try to narrow it down into one specific thing would be tough. Since we're talking about work and the hustle, I would say that the thing that probably resonates with me most is just to have a plan and stick with it. It's not been our best year. It's been clunky and inefficient. The metaphor I like to sort of use is it's like having a little bit of water in your gas tank. It just sputters. We haven't just been able this year to get it off the ground. But this is the first year I've probably had that experience where I've not been worried or stressed out about it, because I know we've got the right plan and we're executing that plan. And it will be the work we put in today that brings in the business and the opportunities tomorrow. So I'm feeling good about that.
How does somebody come to that realization, right? Because every year is not going to be a great year. When we try and think about being successful in a year's time, we make certain types of decisions. When we try and be successful on a decade's path, we give ourselves a little bit more grace and flexibility, but that mindset's tough to come to.
It is. It's funny. My sister's a psychiatrist. And we've had this discussion recently. She's come up with this idea that there are types that are, if you can imagine a four square, and on sort of the vertical axis you have not hard to hard, and then on the horizontal axis you have not fun and fun. And there are people that like hard and not fun, and there are some people that all they want is fun and not hard. I like a good challenge, so part of it's probably my genetic just sort of predisposition to want to wrestle with something. But the reality is, I think, I've been at this for 20 years, self-employed anyway. I've been recruiting for 30, and for 20 years, my pride has gotten in my way, my ego's gotten in my way. I've made many mistakes, and I think I've come to this place of maturity where, we've got good planning in place. I've got good people that surround me. We're all rowing in the same direction at the same pace. And I think that makes it much easier when you have your sights set on a 10-year target, that you can stay focused. Before, my pride, my ego is like, oh, I don't need that. I'm got this squared away. And those are lies that I think entrepreneurs will tell themselves when they just really are trying to shirk responsibility. And I had to decide at some point, was I willing to sacrifice my sort of visionary freedom for some control so that I could actually execute on that vision? Could I sort of find things to ballast myself so that I'm not floating off into space without any, strings attached, And so our planning is probably it. We use Traction, which is the entrepreneurial operating system. It's a methodology. We've been on it for 8 years, and it's really helped us to stay focused, to have a real clear long range plan, and to stay focused on executing against that.
I mean, this is the biggest challenge of building businesses that sustain time. I want to talk about a little bit of an interesting framework that I heard somebody online talking about. They said, it's interesting to think about the mind of an entrepreneur, because when you think about our journey, often we found ourselves in a space working a 9 to 5 where we're unhappy. We said, okay, I'm going to change paths or pivot to become happy. I'm going to start my own business. This is exciting. Things are going on. Everything's exciting. Everything's ramping up, which is great. But if you think about that over a longer time horizon, you extrapolate that out, any other time where we come across stagnation or we're unhappy, the entrepreneurial mind goes back to that original experience that brought us so much fulfillment and joy in pivoting. And so when things get difficult and things get boring, those are the times when you really hunker down, because we're on a path towards sustainability. But that's the opposite of the entrepreneurial mindset, which is really interesting to think about.
I think so. For me, there's a distinction between a visionary. So entrepreneur is a term. You can be an entrepreneur in that you have a business. You may not be a visionary. There are visionaries, and then there are what I call hyper visionaries. And the hyper visionary is the guy who is guy or gal whose ideas are so voluminous that they don't have a way to harness those, and they flit like a butterfly from one idea to the next, and they don't hold themselves accountable to a sort of longer range plan or vision or goal. And so it depends. I think there are some, they get bored easy, and perhaps that's the hyper visionary, and they're constantly trying to just make things new and fresh and exciting. If they're not surrounded by someone that can, keep them from floating off into space or their next idea, best idea, and can't be honest with them that this idea might sound good in theory, but is impractical, it'll be too costly to make, or the market isn't there or whatever, So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's probably very common for entrepreneurs to be visionary, and for a good chunk of them to be hyper visionary, and to do exactly what you just laid out, which is to be constantly in a state of dissatisfaction because of too much routine.
I mean, there's also a cycle, right, in which this goes through. We go through uninformed optimism, right, where it's like, this is going to be great, this is going to change my life. And then we get informed pessimism, where it's like, oh man, this is going to be a lot tougher than I thought it was. Then we have some of those wins. It's like, okay, now I have informed optimism as well. And it kind of wavers, right, which is really interesting.
It's funny. Today on LinkedIn, I saw a post, and actually for 2 days, I've seen this same post, but it's different. So the image or the graphic is different. And it shows a picture on the top graph of like, I can't remember what the term was, but basically discipline was like, just slow and steady, constantly just executing, like very boring, nothing really exciting. Whereas the other graphic was more like this real heavy investment up front. You get to a point where you realize, wow, how much work is that? And slowly that thing begins to trail off into nothing. And so the real probably success attribute is discipline. It's just daily execution against a plan, and it's not always sexy. It's a lot of just, basic blocking and tackling, but it's so necessary.
I can tell from everybody who's watching this episode today, I'm making an assumption, right, about you, Jay. It looks like you're in pretty good shape. It looks like you've been able to, maybe this is from what I'm seeing on the screen.
Okay. I do like to stay in shape. There's physically, I'd say, it probably looks that way. It's funny because recently, 18 months ago, I had a stroke and
Wow.
was completely surprised by that. I didn't know it was a stroke when it was happening, but I knew something was really wrong. So in some ways you could say, well, I look like I'm in shape, but internally, not, obviously there were some issues. So it's really set me on a path of some discovery around health and wellness and, metabolic health and, genetic, sort of understanding my genetic makeup. And so it's been fun and interesting to pick up on some of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm in better shape now than I've been in a long time as a result of what I've learned.
Huge surprise to me because, first of all, I'm incredibly sorry that happened to you. I'm glad that you've been able to kind of position that in your mind as saying this has been a fun adventure that I've been on.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you mind talking about, like, were you stressed ahead of this? Because, like, this is the health of an entrepreneur, right? Somebody who's doing stuff every single day. If we don't have our health, we don't have our business, we don't have the ability to show up. Totally. So what was going on before you kind of had your stroke?
I think, I mentioned earlier, you kind of have these aspects of life and business is just one of those. And so if you really want to try to live this balanced life, you have a certain amount of time. And how do you allocate that time to the things that are most important to you? And, oftentimes what happens, my servant nature is that I will take my personal time and give it to everybody else. So it leaves you with very little. And so I found myself, with a business, feeling a sense of responsibility to invest. I want my team to make sure that they knew that I was as invested in the business as they were, not spend my time in prayer and study, things that start my day with. And so and then I'm in a job where, I spend easy 20 hours of time a week on the phone. So I'm in front of a computer, a good chunk of my time is in front of a screen. It left me very little time to get out. I was more of the mindset of, man, if I'm going to work out, I need to feel exhausted by the end of it. And so the idea of going on a 30-minute walk was nonsense to me.
Yeah.
I had no idea how good that is for me. And so anyway, I think, I wasn't necessarily, my wife would say otherwise. There was something going on the day before that kind of stressed me out, but there was actually quite a bit of other things going on with me that, that contributed to this. Unbeknownst to me was I have a fully blocked artery in my brain. No idea that it exists. I have no calcium or plaque buildup in my arteries anywhere else in my body. And oddly enough, I've just got this one thing. What caused it, how it got there, why, I have no idea. So, I look at it and say, well, this was a blessing. I'm walked away. I have no real physical, side effects from it. It has opened my mind to new and different things, and to learning, and it's got me thinking differently, and that's all good. So it's actually been a really good thing.
Would you consider yourself a high achiever, Jay?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for myself, look, we could always compare ourselves, and certainly compared to some, I'm nothing. I'm a simpleton. I like to push myself. I like to see how fast I can go at a sustainable pace. Like I don't necessarily want to reach a top speed. I want to reach my highest speed for as long as I can. And so that's just sort of my nature. I like to just see where's the point of failure and a lot of things, which makes me annoying in a lot of ways to some people. My wife in particular.
I was gonna say, I'm sure that your wife wants you to slow down a little bit sometimes. There's an interesting perspective, and I read a book back on my shelf over here. It's called The Gap and the Gain by an author named Dan Sullivan. And he said, one of the biggest problems that high achievers often have, our executives, our leaders, our founders, we find ourselves in the gap. The gap is where we are right now and where we're trying to get to our next goal, the finish line, the check mark, the destination, the accomplishment. When we find ourselves always looking from where we're at to where we're going, it's very difficult because when we accomplish that goal, the first thing we do is look up for the next one. And if you're not careful, those goals turn into a horizon, meaning we take one step towards them, they take one step further away from us. Do you ever get time to slow down, maybe because of your incident that you had with your health, to appreciate how far you've come in this journey? Instead of the gap, we're talking about the gain on the other side.
Yeah, for sure. Well, okay, so we go back to that strategic planning. And in 2017, we implemented EOS, and so you start with a 10-year target. And it's funny because for me, there was some internal discussion. We had to decide on what that was going to be. Well, for a lot of people, the ultimate measure of success is money, and that was going to be sort of the goal. Like, we were going to be this much in revenue. I don't necessarily like that. I feel like revenue is a byproduct, and so we pivoted not long after setting a financial goal of hitting a certain number to 5-star reviews. That's our deal. We wanted 1,000 5-star reviews in 10 years. We didn't have any way of tracking that. We didn't know if people would give us that. But that's everything we do is centered around achieving that. And so we can
take us into the cockpit where you say, hey, we're going to hit this financial goal. Then you come back and say, we want 1,000 5-stars. How does that differentiation and decision and priority kind of happen?
Well, it's, man, I think for me, I have a really high sense of responsibility. I want, for my reputation is really important. And so I work really hard. We like the whole, sort of DNA of our organization is built around, like, we have got to be above reproach. That doesn't mean we have to be perfect, but it means we have to strive for that every day. And so it's not about perfection. It's about perfect trying. And so that's where we are, in perfect trying all the time.
I want to double click on that.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfection and perfect trying. Never heard anybody create that framework on the podcast. Break down the difference of those for the audience.
Well, so perfection is a state, it's an ideal, it's oftentimes, it's either it is or it isn't. It really is centered around, giving yourself some grace. If you're a football team or a tennis player, or you're competing in some way, sometimes our best isn't good enough to win. And that's okay. It's not okay, though, to lose because you didn't give it your all. That's where the perfect try comes in. Like, you've got at some point to be able to appreciate that you've really given it all you've got. And then your job is to do a post-mortem on that and figure out, okay, if I could do this all over again, what would I do differently? And that's where learning and growth takes place. And so for me, a lot of people I see, even people I know outside of work, even my family, my kids, like, it's really easy to shame ourselves, to feel guilt about not reaching perfection, to totally melt down at the loss of a game, because we've set our sight on an end and not on the process. And so, to me, it's a lot easier. There's a lot less baggage in the perfect try, because you give yourself grace. It's an opportunity to learn. It's that creates the inflection point for growth. And that's good, in my opinion, as opposed to, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, no, just, that to me is a whole lot lighter. It's a whole lot more fun, it's not, that's why I was saying earlier about the pace. Like, I want to see how far and fast can I run sustained. You reach these points of failure. They're not failure in a sense of being a negative term. It is failure in a sense of it's the beginning of some new growth. And that's really what it should be, which is exciting to me, because now you get to figure out how you can engineer your thing to go faster, because you've learned where the breaking point is. You create this new iteration of yourself.
Jay, you got me, excuse my language for everybody who's listening, you got me fucking jacked up. I love these type of conversations because the relationship that we have with self-improvement and failure specifically is incredibly important. So many times, this is my personal perspective, so you're going to hear a little bit of my jaded upbringing, is I was never a good student. right? And one of the things why I feel like I'm a successful entrepreneur is because at a very young age, second grade, I came home to my mom and said, how long do I have to do this? And she said, Keenan, you've got a long time going through school, so just hold into it. And I said, I just don't understand why, if I don't do good on a test, I'm not as good as the other students in my class. And I said, I feel like there's something else on the other side.
Wow.
And I became very comfortable with hoping that someday there was going to be an iterative process where on the other side of an A to an F scale, the objective was to continue to get better. And then I discovered the growth mindset from Carol Dweck at the University of Stanford. And she says the only objective is to continue to turn the wheel so we can improve, fail, learn, move forward. How do you develop that mindset and that perspective of not being perfect, but only trying?
Yeah, man, I don't know. I think, there's probably my sister, the psychiatrist, could probably help me figure some of that out. I think probably a lot like this all goes back to childhood. It goes back to not being good enough despite our best effort and feeling shitty about that. Like, man, I just don't like feeling shitty. I don't. I don't like it. I don't like guilt. I don't like shame. I don't like condemnation. I don't want any of that stuff. So for me, it was easier once I decided that not being perfect was okay, as long as I was making progress towards improvement. I'm okay with that. Does it get tiring? I mean, I don't really think about it like that. It's just, I don't know. It's just something that I guess I find enough joy in progress that it's okay for me to have a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears along the way. It goes back to that hard, not hard, fun, not fun concept, and I'm okay with hard and not fun. Now, do I want to do that forever? No, I don't. Um, I've got to feel like there's some opportunity to overcome, to achieve. So I'm not going to just continue to run into the cement wall until I can break through. I'm probably going to decide after that hurts bad enough, there's got to be a better way to do this, And when you figure it out, it's kind of fun, because the question that you asked at first was, do you stop? Can you look back and see how far you've come? And it's rewarding to me. I don't know if I'm unique that way, or if there's just a certain breed of people genetically predisposed to, getting geeked out over minor incremental improvements. But if there is, I've got that gene. It's just part of me.
The thing that I love about this is it's not the destination, right? It's the journey. I was going through an exercise with a mentor probably 5 months ago, and she said, Keenan, let's think about when this is all done. Let's put ourselves in the frame of 85-year-old Keenan. What is his biggest regret going to be? And I was like, well, probably not accomplishing more. And she was like, let's really be serious. If you're 85 years old, are you really going to be tripping about not accomplishing more? And I said, well, I mean, the other thing I would be upset about is getting to the end, accomplishing all your goals, right? Having it all, everything that you set out for yourself, that 10-year, 20, 50-year goal horizon, accomplishing those things and then looking back and not enjoying the process.
Yeah.
Because so often we get caught up in, oh, that didn't go right. That iterative process is so difficult. And when you get to the end, you find yourself stressing so much, but you still accomplish your goals. It's like everything happens for a reason. It all works itself out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. 100%. And I think we are as a people, particularly Western society, very much geared towards this, it's gonna come. It's going to come. And it's not until after you look back and you've left all these important things in the wake of these pursuits that maybe you didn't even achieve, or maybe you did. Either way, how many bodies have to be left in your wake, before you say, was it really worth it? And so Stephen Covey is, early in my career, I was a sales guy. I mean, I'm still a sales guy. I can't help it. But back in the day of cassette tapes, I had the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I was driving around in my little Honda Accord, going from one meeting to the next. And I saw that because I'm an efficiency freak. I like efficiency. So I would use that time in between my meetings to educate myself. So I'd listen to this. Well, inevitably, that was a pretty deep content, you'd listen to one part of it and it would trigger this thought and I would be lost in space. Meanwhile, the cassette tape is still running and I'm not listening to a thing it's saying because I'm lost in my own thoughts. I listened to that cassette tape probably 60 or 70 times over and over and over because I'd have to start over again. And it just, kind of just drilled down into my DNA. One of the things that he talks about in his book is begin with the end in mind. And he takes you through this exercise of imagine yourself, close your eyes and imagine yourself. And you're in a room. And in this room, you're surrounded by all these people. These are family, neighbors, and people you knew from your childhood and people you work with. And you can literally see yourself in this room. And then he goes, now you realize that you're at your own funeral. And somebody is going to get up, and these people, all representing the people in your life, are all going to have to get up and give your eulogy. What are they going to say about you? And what do they want? What do you want them to say about you? And if you got a gap between those two, you got to figure out how to close it. Because otherwise, I think, like you said, you end up going, man, I got this, but did I really enjoy it? Is this really the legacy I wanted to leave for myself? And that, at an early point in my life, I mean, I listen to that and I cannot deny the truth of that. Like that is real. And so I use that. I'm like, you're constantly sort of calibrating who you are, how you behave, how you act, what you do, to be able to say at the end of, to have these people in your life say at the end of your days, all these great things, to have them lined up out the door, a mile long, to standing room only, to have the highway shut down. Like that to me is something that is worth striving for, Now, will I care if I only have 20 people in there? No, because I will have tried. I would have given it my best. And that is cool with me. I'm fine with that.
How do we find the balance, Jay, between being that amazing human, right, that has the time and the intentionality to invest into the relationships in our lives, while also balancing our competitiveness to be great and self-improve? How do you do that?
I guess you just have to want the reputation more. You have to think about these things like, man, I don't want to be a phony. I don't want to be a fake. I don't want for anybody in my life to be able to poke holes in my persona, who I am, to say, oh yeah, he's great, but I just don't like that. And that means enough to me to govern myself, to do the things that sometimes are hard. Some people, they may not care as much, and that's fine. I mean, the world needs all kinds of people. I mean, would the world be a better place if we were all thoughtful and mindful about that? Yeah, I think so. Would it be nice that while I'm climbing, that instead of climbing all over people to get to the top, that I'm actually bringing some people alongside me, that we're doing it together? Like, man, I imagine myself being part of that team, and I can tell you which of those roles I don't want. I want to be the guy either bringing somebody up or being brought up. I don't want to be the guy being stepped on. And so to think about my life as a parent, as a husband, as a brother, as a neighbor, I just don't want for people to have that feeling like it's like I'm not trying, That's why it goes back to the perfect try. And it's hard. It is hard. It is. You have to. Stephen Covey also talks about the enemy of great is good. If we overload our lives with too many good things, then the really important things, they will be sacrificed. And so you have to be real careful not to overload yourself. So how do you decide what those big rocks are in your life? What are the things that are worth your time, that are worth fighting for? And do those, and don't let the other stuff interfere.
How do you find your time being prioritized now between business, right? You guys have had some incredible growth in the organization. I know because of my notes here, in 2018, you guys acquired a 40-year-old agency, which really helped you guys expand the business, right? It seems like a ton of responsibility and a ton of Jay's mind being everywhere.
Yeah.
So how do you balance the element of like work-life balance, work-life integration? What does your kind of schedule and prioritization look like?
Typical day for me. I mean, I'm an early morning. I mean, I don't if I set an alarm, which I do, I have an alarm set for 5:30, but I'm usually up before that. Sometimes not by choice, but just because. It's harder for me at times when there's a lot going on, because as soon as my eyes open, whether that's to go to the bathroom or move myself, as soon as my brain kicks into gear, I can't go back to sleep. And so I just get up and I start my routine. Typical day, uh, I am in the Word. So I'm a Christian, so I spend time in Scripture, um, or Bible study. In during that time when it's quiet, uh, there's more opportunity for me to meditate. Like, what am I reading here? I'm not just reading it, but I'm like, you can almost have this spiritual conversation with God while you're trying to tease out what exactly does that word mean? What does that mean exactly? Like, you start thinking about it. So it starts there. I mean, if I'm going to be real, I actually don't start that. I hate that this is true, but when email became available on my phone and social media became available on my phone, I clean all that stuff out first. So I start with that. Like, I feel like I'm better able to focus if I don't feel like there's something over here nagging at me.
I'm
Get
the
all the
exact same
red,
way.
all the little red things, the little, push notifications like cleared out off my phone.
Yeah.
I do that, and then I can do it. So I can do that pretty quickly. Then there's usually some form of study outside of the spiritual side. I'm reading a book, or I'm consuming information on topics that are of interest to me. Given my stroke, it's been a lot of stuff around healthcare and metabolic health and metabolic dysfunction. Researching certain doctors, research doctors, and practitioners, which are two different types of doctors, and you can be both actually, and just trying to seek information from these people that have real deep knowledge in a particular subject matter that I find interesting, and that generally leads to a bunch of different rabbit holes, but it's interesting to me. So that, or it's lately the books that I've read, one called Halftime, and it's the idea of in life you get to a certain point, 35, 40, 45, 50 years old. The first part of your life is success. The second half of your life should be about significance. So what does that look like? And how do you make this transition from success to significance? I'm reading another book on that now, different author, same concept, and so that's interesting to me. Again, all this sort of aligns with this end in mind philosophy of, am I going to give good reason for people at the end of my day to give me a double thumbs up, 5 stars, like if my epitaph is 5 stars, that's it, a 5-star rating. That would be awesome.
Tie it back, baby.
No words, just 5 stars.
Could you imagine Jay Lucas 5 stars on his tombstone? You know what I mean? That would be,
they would be painted yellow. Yeah, like bright yellow.
Exactly. So here, I want to double click on the success to significance, right? Part of why I love having these conversations is when we have the ability to talk about why these are priorities at our chapters or seasons in our career, it gives the people who are behind us, who are just getting started, kind of an opportunity to see where their mind will be focusing. So what's the difference between success and significance for you?
Success is generally, to me, it is like, achievement in your career. It's possessions, it's money, it's house, it's cars, it's kids to school, and all of that kind of stuff. Significance is more a legacy. What are you really leaving behind for generations? How will you be remembered? Whose life are you going to impact? Not how much money I have in my bank account, not what title I have. It's not about accolades. It is that you are going to impact the world in some way because of your commitment to selfless service to other people. And that to me is probably how I would describe that.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Yeah.
So, One of the scariest experiences, give a little context for everybody here on the podcast. When I was 25, 26 years old, my business partner now, a guy named Dante McLean, was running an online marketing business, right? We was helping gyms acquire customers in their local
Oh
markets,
yeah,
brick and
cool.
mortar, right?
Yeah.
Micro CrossFit gyms. My buddy was doing like $350,000 a month, right? In his mid 20s, incredibly successful. At the point in time, we were young, so he was buying all this crazy stuff, brand new Tesla Model X with the doors that go up back in 2017, $120,000+. When I was younger, I always saw my peers who were super successful acquiring items, and I put a lot of self-validation on when I get there, I'm going to feel just like these guys. But I'll tell you what, the scariest experience is when I was able to purchase some of those things. I was so excited. And as soon as I got them, I put them into that dark hole inside me, expecting it to fill it, and it disappeared. Have you ever had the scary experience of putting priority on the accolades, the accomplishments, the money, the bank account revenue, and then you get it and it's not as fulfilling as you thought it was going to be?
Yeah, I think I think there's, even for somebody who's super aware of it, there's always this tension between those two spaces. Um, I mean, I like nice things. I do. I don't. I wrestled with guilt about that for a while, for a period, and I might not be done wrestling with that guilt, but right now I'm okay with that. I'm in a good place around that. But yeah, I mean, I ask myself sometimes in my mind, would having a Ferrari or a airplane or a yacht, or like, would that really move the needle on where my personal joy is? And I know the answer to that. So the question really is, okay, well, um, I don't know. I mean, it really just comes down to our willingness to want to be honest with ourselves. And I think there are some people. The truth, I've come to this. This is sort of I like to speak in metaphor. Um, I hear it a lot from people that I'm close to. Like, man, you're the king of metaphors. It's just how my brain works. But I'm losing my train of thought. What was I talking about?
So we were talking about the realization. We talked about tension between items, right? As we get older, right? We think that
Oh,
there's an
truth. So being honest with ourselves. So truth. So honesty and truth, they're the same thing. Um, Honesty perhaps is just truth spoken, truth manifest, like seen. A lot of times we don't want to be honest with ourselves. We will lie to ourselves. And so my metaphor in all of this is truth is a bit like whiskey or red wine or cigars. It's an acquired taste. If you're new to it and you try to consume it in volume, you're not going to like it at all, at all. So you have to incrementally, and I will tell you, uh, if there's shame or guilt or condemnation or ego or pride associated, that's going to mess it all up. You have to be able to cut yourself some slack, give yourself some grace, and to not let somebody else push their guilt or shame on you, so that when you tell yourself that truth that is ugly and is unpalatable and really doesn't align with this image that you want to create for yourself, sweeping it under the rug doesn't make it not real. It's still there, and so it's way better to just bring it out in the open and just address it. But if you try to do it or have someone facilitate doing it before you're ready to take it in the volume that you might be getting it, you're either going to shut down and you're going to shut it out and you'll never want to hear truth again. Um, but hopefully you've got people in your life and you yourself get to a point where you look forward to the truth, like a cigar or a glass of wine or a fine whiskey, not because you're going to drink it up in volume, but you look forward to it. It's something that you relish. It's something that you can enjoy. And so for me, I mean, I think just getting to a point where you can be honest with yourself, not feel shame or guilt about it, because again, that's where that progress begins. But we also, especially with people, we have to be careful to understand where people are in their appetite for the truth. Because if I try to give it to them in a volume that they're not ready for, the results are never going to be good, ever. Even if your intentions are good, it's not going to come out so great.
How have you learned to address team members, people of your organization in different ways that hit on their specific chords to get a point across? I want to give a little context again. Yesterday, I was having a conversation with another CEO, and we were talking about our favorite leaders right now, right? My favorite leader right now is in the space of sports, college football. Dion Sanders at the University of Colorado gave this amazing little snippet interview on one of their vlogs he did. Somebody said, hey, Dion, you've got men coming from all across the country, coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different cultures, different races, everything. How do you get everyone so motivated? And he said, well, I'll tell you what I don't do. I don't take the same message and try and cast it across all of my men. What I have to do is spend enough time with people to recognize what is going to be the button that I can push to get you motivated. Sometimes I might have to take Keenan by the collar and yell in his face to get him jacked up. I might have to have a private conversation with Jay and say, hey, man, listen, like this is what's going on. You can do better. I know that. The other person, I can say, hey, I'm going to give your mom a call and tell her what you're doing out here messing around the classroom. How have you been able to adopt that patience to be able to engage with your different team members? Because that leadership style is a skill set that we have to be able to adopt.
Well, okay. So let's go back to Dion for just a second. I venture to guess that's not a tactic. I think he genuinely cares about these guys. So if it doesn't start with that, none of that other bullshit matters. It doesn't matter. If somebody feels like you're manipulating them because you know what it is that motivates them, if that motivation is coming from a place of manipulation, no bueno. If it's coming from a place of, I want to see you realize your true potential, I care about you. I think that if you could suffer enough to see what it's like on the other side of this challenge, it'll be worth it to you. That's a different animal. A totally different animal.
That feels different when I hear you say it. Right. Yeah. I think about a loving, high compassion conversation of like, Jay, listen, we just need to get through this because I know you can do more. I know you can be better. That is a different conversation than saying, Jay, go this way because it's going to be good for you. You know what I mean?
So I would probably add to his story to say it before it's even getting to know those people, it is the fact that he actually genuinely cares about those people. He does. I think, and I'm not a huge fan myself because I'm more of the walk softly, carry a big stick guy. He's a little loud for my taste. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. He's just boisterous in a way. That's not my style. I don't like attention called to me. He's a different guy that way. He loves the attention. I don't. So stylistically, we're very different, but I think our hearts very similar. So I can relate in that way. And I see that, So for me, if you imagine, any business owner, any executive who's got an organization and they're busy executing and capitalizing on the opportunities, and they know you for the simple reason of manipulating you to their end game, I think people will put up with that. Like revenue is the greatest deodorant, like if everybody wants to be on a winning team, Terrell Owens back on the Cowboys. Like when everybody's winning, like you'll put up with some bullshit, when everybody's winning. As soon as we stop winning, that stuff, the stink is so bad. You I can't tolerate this anymore. So the only thing that will keep people playing for a losing team is when you know that the person or the people that you're shouldered up with and you're locked arms with are in it with you 100%. And that what you're trying to achieve isn't some vain, accolade or achievement, but greatness. Not because you want to be in the limelight, but because you want it to motivate other people. You want for people to see what is possible. And that I think people will stick around for.
Jay, first of all, I feel like you need your own podcast because you've been dropping knowledge bombs throughout this entire conversation, which has been
I
amazing.
appreciate that.
Here's a question for you. I've been messing around with this terminology or a framework called self-development trajectory. Okay. When I was younger, right, I moved to Las Vegas in 2012. I was a 21-year-old kid. I got surrounded by a whole bunch of kids here that love to party and go to all the clubs, right? So that became a part of my life. And then one day I realized that me going to the club on a Wednesday and being drunk on a Thursday morning, not a good look for my overall success. So I had to really start focusing on personal development. One of the things that I found was as I was continuously focusing on improving myself, that message often didn't align with those friends that I had. And my self-improvement trajectory took me away from that group. For a lot of people, they said, Keenan, you've changed. And I said, of course I have, because I'm not trying to be the same kid as I was when I was 24. Have you been through the process of that self-improvement trajectory caused you to lose friends, change your social circle, change the way in which you supported people around you?
Man, that's a good question. I feel like I've always known who I am. I don't like the feeling of hangovers. I much prefer the high of the perfect try. Um, have I lost friends or chosen different friends because I felt some would influence me in ways that, again, I go back to that end in mind, like, man, you're going to tarnish what I'm trying to achieve. No offense to you, more power to you if that's what you want to do. But I, I don't reconcile what I have in my mind for my end to with with this lifestyle that you guys, yeah, it's fun and cool and everything, but man, this thing is way more important to me. And so, yeah, I mean, I mean, friend, the word friend is, man, that's a loosely used word today. So to me, maybe they're better known as social acquaintances. People that you have fun with. And yeah, I've cut ties from that because I thought, man, I can't. I'm gonna be a phony, and being a phony is the pain of being a phony, or the thought of being identified as a phony, or tarnishing, my story. That was more significant to me than the fun and enjoyment of party all day and party all night kind of thing. So that was an easy decision. But yeah, I mean, I put my toe in the water.
I mean, it's a tough struggle for a lot of people. A lot of the younger entrepreneurs, people who are starting to create their own businesses, find themselves like not being like other people, a black sheep, if you will. And that's a really tough process. And we have to struggle, right, with that intuition that recognizes where we're going is not the same place. And sometimes people have a tough time being able to limit those relationships in their lives. And you end up carrying anchors around, which is really tough.
Yeah. Well, no, I agree. I think if being associated with a group of people is your, whoopee, your, sort of comfort blanket, whatever you want to call it, um, you're probably masking something. There's a truth that you need to tell yourself, or you need to hear about yourself, even if it's just between your own ears. Um, like I said, some people, they don't like that truth. It's very uncomfortable for them because whatever in their life has caused them to receive this truth, because the people who are supposed to care for them in their life, instead of giving them the truth as a form of protection, they've used it as a weapon. And so they don't want to hear that, because what they hear is, I'm not good enough. I can't do this, which is the voice of the enemy, in my opinion, because shame and guilt, condemnation, that's the weapons of the enemy. Um, but, uh, but so what they do is they mask that. It's still there. That truth is still there. That thing that they don't want to recognize about themselves is still there. It's just covered up with stuff.
Yeah.
Whether that's money, or that's friends, or that's alcohol, or that's drugs, or that's a, what's the word I'm looking for? it's common for parents of addicts, I don't know, enabling, it's not enabling, but it's codependency is the word I'm looking for, like a codependent relationship. Like these are distractions from you really working on your stuff. So you got to ask yourself, why am I so afraid to look at that? What's really keeping me from, because I promise you, spending more nights at the bar is not going to make you a better whatever. It's not gonna, maybe for some, maybe at the end of their days, they want people to say about them, nobody partied harder than that dude. That's not what I want. I think there are probably fewer people that say that, but maybe there are some. I don't know. I don't know any of those people myself.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this conversation because I had a guy on the podcast before. His name was Jason Yarusi, and his whole like mantra was live 100. And he said, Keen, let me explain what this means. He said, in different areas of your life, you have the potential to live at 100, being a better partner, being a better friend, being a better brother, being a better sister, whatever that looks like, being a better business partner, being a better leader. You have 100% in all those different categories. Often we live at 86, 74, 91, 74, 96, whatever that looks like. And you never really recognize, or you might recognize subconsciously, that you're not living up to that 100 level. When we get to the end of our days, that delta between 86, 91, and 100, whatever it is where our dreams come true. And if you hold yourself accountable to being the best version of yourself, everything else really takes care of itself. But you have to have that tough conversation to recognize Keenan's not living at 100 in that category of his life.
And not just that, but then you have to make the choice. Do I really want to make that better? Do I really want to move the needle? So I was in a peer advisory group for 8 years, C12 group. And this is Christian CEO Peer Advisory Board. They've got boards all over the world now, or in multiple countries. And every month we would sit down. There was 10 or 12 of us on a specific board, and there's multiple boards, but my board was it ranged from probably 8 to 12 people. We would start our morning after a devotion with what they called the balance wheel. And the balance wheel was, how's my marriage? How's my health? How's my, personal finances? And you'd go around. And so you imagine this circle. And at the center of this, you got basically slices, pies, and 10 is on the outside. And so you color in, okay, well, I'm personal finance, I'm here, business finance, I'm here, marriage, I'm here, fun, relaxation is here. You go around all these important components of your life, and you're looking not necessarily that they're all at 10, but is there a broken spoke in there somewhere? Am I sacrificing some critical component for others? And how do I get balance? Because it's like having a flat tire. Now, you get 7s all the way around, that wheel will roll pretty smooth. If you're at a 10 on one and a 4 and zeros on a few, you're like, well, that's a bumpy wheel. That's not a fun ride. Exactly. Exactly. And so the idea then creates this accountability. We'd go around and review everybody's, and you'd say, okay, well, all right, do you have some sort of takeaway? Like if you're constantly low on personal health, what are you going to do? Because next month when you're low on personal health again, like something's got to give. Or you're just saying, I'm not serious. I'm not a serious person about this, which takes me back to my end in game. That is not something I want somebody to say about me at the end of my days. He was not a serious person.
Jay, we have a tradition here on the podcast. Our previous guest wanted to ask you a blind question as we put the wheels down to kind of land this year. Who is your favorite superhero and why?
Ooh, favorite superhero. Man. Okay, so I can't help but think about cartoons when I think superhero. So I'm not going to go Jesus because he's obviously my favorite superhero. But if I was gonna, I would say Batman. And I don't know that I have a real reason why, other than his costume was cool. I loved his costume, and that's probably why. And he had a cool car.
And a cool car and a cool life, you know what I
and
mean?
a cool cave.
That's what I mean. He's a cool dude.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was rich and he was like the full picture. Although I say all these things and they're all coming to me right now. It's not necessarily why. But I'll probably say that because if I was going to dress up for Halloween, like Batman was the costume I wanted. That was my costume. Spider-Man was a close second, but Batman was probably number one for sure.
Well, brother, it's easy to understand why you are the definition of heart and hustle. This conversation has been incredibly insightful, so valuable. And once again, you drop so many knowledge bombs and amazing metaphors here, right? Perfection versus the perfect try, right? Mm-hmm. We also talk about wine, whiskey, and cigars, just like truth or an acquired taste. Man, I've got so many nuggets that I'm going to pull up from this episode. I'm going to share with other people. So I'm going to continue your name in the ethos of the podcast for a long time, brother. I appreciate you coming on the show.
All right. Thanks for having me.